Welcome to Lecture 2, the Circular Flow Diagram. In this lecture, we're going to start to talk about the actual flow of both resources and goods and services through the economy. This is a very simplistic model, and at the end of this lecture, we're going to talk a little bit about the assumptions that we made and items that are missing from this model. So again, make sure you recognize that this is a simple model and not as complex as what the real world would look like. So when we're thinking about the circular flow diagram, the first two pieces we're going to discuss are the agents. And the agents include first households. And households are you, me, individual families. And these individual families own the factors of production. They own the resources. And remember, our factors of production are land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurial ability. And households own these factors of production and they sell them. So we can think about labor as the most realistic for ourselves. We own our time. We have 24 hours available in our day, and we can sell our time in the form of labor and say, I will agree to work for you for 8 hours today for X number of dollars per hour. And this is exactly what we're talking about when we think about selling resources. And why do we sell our resources? Why do we sell our land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurial ability? We do it to earn an income so we have the ability to buy goods and services. So households are going to sell their factors of production in order to buy goods and services. Our other agent is going to be businesses. Businesses are the ones that buy the factors of production. They use the factors of production. They mix all the land, labor, capital, entrepreneurial ability together and bundle it into the form of a good or service. So they're going to buy the resources, the factors of production from the households, and then bundle them into a product in which they sell to the household. So we're going to see that businesses and households work together in order to provide factors of production that produce goods and services that are then consumed by households. So within this model, we not only have two agents, but we also have two markets. And the first market is probably one you're not as familiar with, but it's what we call the resource market. The resource market is where those factors of production flow. So households sell their factors of production in the resource market, and businesses go to the resource market to buy the factors of production. And the other market that we're going to talk about is the product market. And the product market is going to be businesses sell the goods and services in the product market, and households are going to buy the goods and services from the product market. All right, so as we start to put more flows into our circular flow diagram, these are going to make more sense. So let's start incorporating some flows. So households own those factors of production. They take those land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurial ability, those factors of production, and they bring them to the resource market. There are businesses within the resource market that want to buy your labor. And so those factors of production then flow into the business. The business treats the cost of these factors of production as their cost of business. So they know it's going to cost them to produce the goods and services that they do, and the costs are going to be the cost of the land, the cost of the labor, the cost of production. And so costs are the outflowing into the resource market, and then flowing into the households are going to be rent. Rent is what we call the price of the land. Wages, the price of labor. Capital, or interest, the price of capital. And profits. And this is probably one of the most tricky pieces for students. Profits aren't earned by businesses. Let me repeat that. Profits aren't earned by businesses. Profits are actually earned by households. The households that have entrepreneurial ability. So those entrepreneurs, the ones that take on the risk, the ones that are out there working night and day for their business, they're the ones that earn the profit. So it's not the business that earns the profit, it's the households that have entrepreneurial ability. All right, so that's a very important distinction. It's never the business that earns profits, it's always the households. All right, so why do we work? Why do we earn wages? Why do we rent out land, earn rent and interest, and why do we have profits? all because we want to buy goods and services. And where do those goods and services come from? They come from businesses. So businesses are selling their goods and services to the product market, and then those goods and services are then bought up by the households. What do we call the cost of these goods and services? They're the consumer expenditures. They're the amount that consumers are spending on the goods and services for consumption. And then finally, the revenue is what flows into those into those businesses. So businesses receive revenues, and then their costs go out into the resource market. And yes, whatever's left after they pay their costs are profits. But remember, it's not those businesses that are taking home the profits. It's the entrepreneurs that are taking the risk. And so those profits flow through to households. All right, so just a couple of notes on some very big assumptions that we make when we're looking at the circular flow diagram. First off, what we don't see is the government. We know that we buy essentially a lot from the government. The government takes care of education at the secondary and elementary levels. The government can take care of our road system. And so we're consuming a lot of products that are provided by the government. However, government is completely missing from our circular flow diagram. This is a very big assumption, but one we make just to simplify the entire model. We also know that businesses can sell and buy from other businesses, or households may buy and sell from other households, and that's completely missing from this piece. But what I want you to remember is that this is a simplification, and I want to go over this one more time just with some real life examples. So remember, when we're referring to our households are you and me. We are our households that are our first agent within our circular flow diagram. We know there are businesses all over the world, and they're the ones that are demanding those factors of production. They're bundling that up together to make their goods and services. Our resource market, again, a little bit difficult, but this resource market, this is where we're going to determine the demand for jobs. How many people do we want to be doctors? How many people do we demand to be computer software engineers? And so all of those are determined within the resource market. Also, what's the wage of a football player? Determined in the resource market. When you're thinking of a resource market, I want you to think of something like a job fair. I go to a job fair to try and find somebody who's willing to buy my labor. I have labor that I want to sell, and I go to a job fair. Businesses go to the job fair to find employees, to find people that they want to buy their labor. That's what happens in a resource market. Wages, rents, interest, and profits all determined within the resource market. The quantity demanded, the quantity supplied of labor, land, entrepreneurial ability, capital, all determined within that resource market. The product market, I would compare it to a farmer's market. Farmers are going to bring goods and services that they've produced to the farmer's market. Those households, they go to the farmer's market to buy goods and services. A great example of a market, a product market, in which the price of any goods and services that the final consumer will be our households, that's where it's determined, in that product market. So the demand for something like clothing is going to be determined in our product market. The price of jewelry determined in the product market. And so we can think about anything with that end consumer as being the product market. All right, let's go through a quick quiz and see. So for the first two questions, I want you to determine in which market is this determined. And in the second section, I want you to answer either business or household. So which is correct, market participant or market agent that purchases labor, owns land, receives profit. So pause now, go through those questions, and then we'll go through the answers. All right, so for the first question, in which market is the price of a car determined? We're talking about the end user of a car being a household, and so the price of the car is determined in the product market. For the second part, in which market is the quantity of land used for industry determined? This is a resource market. So how is this land being used? It's being used for industry, and that's a resource market. It's going to be part of the factors of production. All right, for the second one, business or household, which market participant purchases labor? Well, we know that I own my labor and I'm a household, and so it's businesses that go to the resource market in order to purchase labor. Which market participant owns land? Households owned land. Okay, households own the land and they sell that land to businesses. Which market participant receives profits? And this is the tricky one, and I hope everybody gets it right on the quiz. It's households. Households that have that entrepreneurial ability are the ones that receive profits. All right, so that concludes our lecture 2. If you have any additional questions or would like more practice on the circular flow diagram, make sure you check out the More Practice folder.